At 35,000 feet, the only thing separating you from a negative 60-degree void is a few layers of plastic and a thin sheet of metal. But here is the terrifying question. Inside the cabin, the air pressure is heavy and comfortable. Outside, the atmosphere is so thin it is practically lethal. So, why doesn't this pressurized metal tube explode outward like a popped balloon? The answer isn't just about strong rivets. It is about a constant, violent battle for survival. Most passengers assume the fuselage is built like a tank. But if you actually looked at the cross-section, you would be terrified. The aluminum skin keeping you alive is shockingly thin. In some areas, it is barely the thickness of a standard credit card. If that skin fails, the result isn't just a breeze. It is catastrophic. But the physical structure is only half the story. The real danger is invisible. At this altitude, you are flying through the death zone. If the pressure inside the cabin were to suddenly equalize with the outside, your survival time is measured in seconds. The gases dissolved in your bloodstream would instantly expand according to Boyle's law. Your blood would literally boil at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. You would pass out from tissue damage long before you froze to death. So how do engineers keep you alive in a place where humans were never meant to exist? Well, they turn the entire airplane into a living, breathing organism, a high-altitude life support system. But simply pumping air into the cabin isn't enough. If you just pumped air in without letting it out, the pressure would build until the fuselage ripped apart. So the plane has to do something incredibly difficult. It has to leak. But it has to leak with absolute precision. And the safety of every soul on board relies on one unsung hero hidden at the very back of the tail. A mechanical gatekeeper known as the outflow valve. To understand this life support system, you have to follow the air itself, and the journey begins in the last place you would want to be. The engines. But here is the real mystery. The air outside is too thin to breathe, so the plane has to manufacture its own atmosphere. It does this by harvesting air from the compressor stage of the jet engines. This is called bleed air. But there is a catch. Inside the engine, that air is being crushed with such violence that it reaches a searing 800 degrees Fahrenheit. It is hot enough to melt lead. If this air entered the cabin directly, it would roast everyone on board in seconds. So, before it reaches your lungs, it has to pass through the packs. The air cycle machines located in the belly of the plane. These are essentially massive, high-powered refrigerators, but they don't use Freon. They use the physics of expansion. They take that volcanic, high-pressure air and spin it through a turbine, flash, freezing it to a breathable temperature in a fraction of a second. It is a masterpiece of thermal engineering happening right beneath your feet, turning fire into ice. From there, the air is mixed with recirculated air that has passed through hospital-grade HEPA filters, removing 99.9% of bacteria and viruses. This mixed air is then pumped into the cabin from the ceiling vents, pushing old air down to the floor. This creates a circular airflow pattern designed to isolate germs, wrapping you in a curtain of sterile air. But pumping air in is only half the battle. The real magic is controlling how it leaves. This brings us back to that mechanical gatekeeper at the tail, the outflow valve. Think of the fuselage as a giant leaking balloon. The engines are constantly blowing it up, and this valve is the only thing stopping it from popping. It acts as the airplane's artificial lung. Sensors monitor the cabin pressure thousands of times per second. If the pressure gets too high, the valve opens just a hair, sometimes less than a millimeter, to let air escape. If the pressure drops, it clamps shut. It is a constant, computerized balancing act. This valve maintains a cabin altitude of around 6,000 to 8,000 feet. That is why you don't need an oxygen mask, even though you are cruising at an altitude where water boils at room temperature. The valve is fighting the laws of physics to trick your body into thinking you are standing on a mountain peak in Colorado, not floating in the deadly stratosphere. And what about the structure itself? We mentioned the thin skin, but if you were to touch the bare metal of the fuselage at cruising altitude, your hand would instantly freeze. Outside, it is a negative 60-degree deep freeze. Inside, it is a comfortable 70 degrees. Between you and that deadly cold is a layer of insulation blankets, thick fiberglass mats tucked hidden behind the plastic wall panels. They serve a critical purpose. They don't just keep you warm, they stop the roar of the engines from deafening you. Without them, the sound inside the cabin would be louder than a jackhammer, vibrating your internal organs for the entire flight. They are the silent guardians, dampening the screaming wind outside so you can sleep. This brings us to the human element. Inside this highly engineered bubble, life feels deceptively normal. The lighting is soft, the flight attendants are pouring coffee. You are watching a movie or reclining your seat, but shift your perspective for a second. Look at the person sleeping next to the window. Their head is resting just inches from the glass. That pane of acrylic is the only thing separating their comfortable reality from a chaotic vacuum. You are sitting in a chair, traveling at 80% the speed of sound, in an environment that would kill you in seconds. The contrast is terrifyingly beautiful. 20 centimeters. That is the distance between a nap and oblivion. You might not see the system working, but you can feel it. That pop in your ears during takeoff or landing, that is your body reacting to the machine. As the plane climbs, the outflow valve manages the pressure drop, and the air trapped inside your ears expands. In fact, the fuselage itself behaves like a living skin. Under the immense pressure of the air being pumped inside, the metal actually stretches. The diameter of the plane expands slightly during flight and contracts when you land. The whole ship is breathing, inhaling from the engines and exhaling through the tail, pulsating with energy to keep you alive. We pack hundreds of people into this sealed aluminum canister, strap them into tiny seats, and hurl them through the sky. It is an act of supreme faith. We trust the machine implicitly. For millions of flights, this artificial lung breathes perfectly. The valves open, the valves close, and you land safely without ever thinking about the physics keeping you alive. But what happens when that harmony is broken? What happens when the metal fatigues? What happens when a window cracks or a door seal fails, and that violent pressure differential suddenly finds a way out? Imagine this: you are cruising at 35,000 feet, sipping a ginger ale. Suddenly, a deafening boom shatters the silence. This is rapid decompression, the nightmare scenario. Instantly, the cabin fills with a thick, white fog. It looks like smoke, but it is actually water vapor condensing out of the air as the pressure violently drops. The comfortable 70 degrees plummets to sub-zero in a heartbeat. The roar of the wind is overwhelming. And then comes the rubber jungle. From the ceiling, hundreds of yellow oxygen masks deploy simultaneously. You have less than 15 seconds of useful consciousness. 15 seconds. If you don't get that mask on, hypoxia will set in, and you will simply drift off to sleep while the chaos unfolds around you. But while passengers are scrambling, the real drama is happening in the cockpit. The pilots don't panic. They revert to training. They execute what are called memory items. Actions so critical they must be performed instinctively without looking at a checklist. First, they don't fight the plane. They put on their own masks, establish communications, and then they initiate the most terrifying maneuver in civil aviation, the emergency descent. The pilot slams the throttles to idle, cutting the power. Then, he deploys the speed brakes. These are the panels on top of the wings that pop up to destroy lift. The entire airframe begins to shudder violently. It feels like the plane is tearing itself apart, but this turbulence is intentional. It creates drag, allowing the nose to drop without the plane overspeeding. Then, he pushes the stick forward. Hard. The aircraft pitches down. To a passenger, it feels like falling. You are pressed into your seat belt, weightless for a second, then heavy again. The plane enters a dive at 7,000 feet per minute. To put that in perspective, a normal descent is about 1/500. This is a controlled freefall. The goal is simple: get down fast. The air up here is killing everyone on board. The pilots have to get the plane below 10,000 feet, where the air is thick enough to breathe without masks. In under 4 minutes, it is a race against biology. As the plane slices through the clouds, the pressure on your ears is intense. The fuselage groans under the aerodynamic stress. But this violent dive is a precision ballet. The pilots are constantly monitoring their airspeed, ensuring they don't tear the wings off while running away from the vacuum of space. Finally, at 10,000 feet, the nose comes up. The speed brakes retract. The shuddering stops. The thick, oxygen-rich air of the lower atmosphere floods the cabin as the plane levels off. You can breathe. The crisis is contained. The life support system failed, but gravity and training saved you. But what if the pilots didn't get their masks on in time? What if the cockpit went silent? This leads us to the final line of defense. But let's push the nightmare to its limit. What if the pilots fail? What if they succumb to hypoxia before they can initiate the dive? Does the plane become a ghost ship drifting until it runs out of fuel? Not anymore. Modern jets are being equipped with a dead man switch called emergency autoland. If the pilots go silent, the computer realizes something is wrong. It takes command. It communicates with air traffic control, finds the nearest runway, calculates the approach, lowers the gear, and brings the bird to a complete stop on the ground. It is the final digital guardian. But while the robot flies the plane, you are still breathing through that yellow mask. And here is the twist. There is no oxygen tank above your head. Storing pressurized gas canisters over every seat would be a bomb waiting to go off. So, how are you breathing? You are inhaling the smoke of a chemical fire. Inside the overhead panel is a device called a chemical oxygen generator. It is filled with sodium chlorate and iron powder. When you pull the mask down, you pull a pin that ignites a percussion cap. This starts a chemical reaction burning at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. It is basically a controlled solid fuel rocket motor that emits pure oxygen instead of thrust. You are alive because of a furnace burning inches above your hair. Aviation is a game of redundancy. Layers upon layers of engineering designed to cheat death. So the next time you are on a flight and you feel that pressure building in your ears, don't chew gum and complain. Listen to it. That popping sensation is the sound of the outflow valve doing its job. It is the fuselage expanding and contracting. It is the heartbeat of a machine that is actively fighting the vacuum of space to keep your blood liquid and your lungs full. It is the most sophisticated life support system in history, and it works so well, we mostly just sleep through it. If you want to understand the beast that powers this entire system, click the video on the screen now to see inside a jet engine. Fly safe. We often forget that flying is a violent miracle. We complain about the legroom or the Wi-Fi, ignoring the fact that we are being hurled through a frozen vacuum at 600 miles per hour. We are kept alive not by luck, but by a few mechanical valves and lines of computer code fighting a constant war against the atmosphere. That pop in your ears during descent, it isn't just an annoyance. It is a handshake between you and the machine. It is the steel lung confirming that the pressure is holding, that the invisible shield protecting you from the void is intact. So next time you land, take a moment to appreciate the silence. It means the system worked. But the air system is just one part of the puzzle. What about the monsters under the wing that generate that life-saving pressure? How do they spin at 20,000 RPM without melting? To unlock the secrets of the jet engine, click the video on the screen now. You will never look at a plane the same way again.